My fourth category of logical fallacies involves bad use of evidence. The person making a positive claim, such as affirming the existence of something or of some phenomenon, bears the burden of proof. Shifting the burden of proof means demanding that others prove you wrong, despite the fact that you are the person who made the positive claim. Bertrand Russell famously made an analogy of a celestial teapot that cannot be observed by astronomers. No one in their right minds would accept that such a thing exists. They would demand that Russell prove it does exist before they would accept the claim. Similarly, if someone makes a claim that something is the case, if they want to be taken seriously, they have to give the rest of us good reasons to accept the claim. And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If what is being claimed is an ordinary thing that fits the scientific worldview, we can pretty easily accept the claim. But if the claim goes against what is known about how the world works, we will obviously want a bit more than someone's say-so to believe it. When evidence is required, a simple anecdote is usually not enough. Appeal to anecdotes could have been included in the previous category of appeals to wrong things, but I included it here because it's about evidence. First of all, an anecdote is not necessarily trustworthy. Even if we believe the person it comes from is honest, it does not follow that their belief of what happened is correct. Humans are terrible witnesses, for example. Our senses and even our memories cannot nearly always be trusted. We fall victim to all sorts of illusions, mirages, trickery, faulty memory, and even suggestive memory reconstruction. Second, even if the source is correct, we may be dealing with a fluke incident, one-off that is being misinterpreted as having something to do with a more general phenomenon. We need to be careful not to make hasty generalizations. Often statistical data is required. For the reality of a phenomenon to be ascertained, repeatability is generally needed. In other words, what we need is scientific studies, not anecdotes. Generalizations can easily be fallacies. One such type involves misunderstanding of the composition or division of the thing in question. Just because something is true about a part of some larger thing, it does not follow that the same is true about the larger thing as a whole. Racists, for example, are eager to point out, whenever they can, to any crime committed by a member of a minority they hate. They claim, or at least insinuate, that all members of that group of people commit crimes like that, or that they are collectively guilty of such crimes. This should be an obvious fallacy of composition. If this is not obvious to you, then think of how cheap one part of your computer is. For example, it has some tiny, very inexpensive screws in it, or other components. Is your computer therefore very cheap? It could be cheap, but not because you can point to a cheap component. The converse way of thinking would be the fallacy of division. You can incorrectly infer from something that is true of the whole to a conclusion about a member of the whole. You might think that since the United States of America is the richest country in the world, then everyone in that country must be rich. Or since you can think, a nail clipping that you have removed from your toenail can also think, right? Probably not. Sometimes people feel certain about a phenomenon's reality and claim to be able to prove it easily. When this alleged phenomenon is tested, as has been extensively done with so-called dowsing, and the phenomenon fails to replicate, these people will come up with excuses to explain why it didn't work that time. This fallacy is known as moving the goalposts or special pleading. And this is how it goes. You have set down criteria for something, but then those criteria are either met or not met, depending on which you did not want to happen. Because you don't want to accept the result, you change the criteria. In other words, you move the goalposts. For example, you find it silly and pointless that there's a magazine from some hobby like weightlifting. Then someone points out that there's also a magazine for your hobby, which could be painting miniature models, for example. Now you defend your hobby and the magazine for that hobby as important somehow. Suddenly, having a magazine for a hobby is not silly anymore. You have moved the goalposts. The no true Scotsman fallacy is similar to moving goalposts. It involves discounting an example by claiming that it is not the proper or pure example of what was being discussed. This fallacy is thus also called an appeal to purity. It obviously could have been included in the category of appeals to wrong things, but I included it here because it has to do with evidence again. So let's imagine a scenario where Bethany claims that all Scotsmen love haggis. Along comes Angus MacRob, a native of Scotland with ancestors there going back at least 10 generations. But Angus hates haggis. You might now point to him as a counterexample to Bethany's claim. But now Bethany claims that Angus is not a true Scotsman and so doesn't count as a counterexample. Criteria for purity can be used to exclude unwanted examples or instances. It is thus important to select the criteria first and to stick to them when analyzing data. The criteria have to be designed so that no true Scotsman is not hidden in them, even by accident. For example, if you want to gather data about all people, you cannot only include those with blue eyes. That would be terrible selection bias, something I will return to when discussing the philosophy of science.